I was 8 years old when my parents decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore. It didn't happen suddenly. In fact, I can't remember a time when I truly felt wanted by them. But that day, when my mom began packing my things, everything finally became crystal clear. They didn't love me, they barely tolerated me. And now that they had a second chance at parenthood, I was being thrown away like yesterday's garbage. Growing up, I didn't fully understand why my parents seemed so unhappy with me. I thought all parents acted the same way, cold, detached, and distant. It wasn't until I started school and saw how my friends' parents treated them, with smiles, hugs, and encouragement, that I realized something was missing. My parents didn't smile at me like that. They didn't cheer me on when I succeeded or comfort me when I failed. To them, I was more of an inconvenience than a child. They had me when they were barely out of college, both still trying to figure out their careers. I was the kid who interrupted their ambitious plans, the one who drained their time, money, and energy. For years, I tried to make it up to them. I did my best to stay out of their way, to get good grades, and to behave well. But no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. By the time I was 7, their resentment had become impossible to ignore. They started to lose patience with me over the smallest things. Spilled milk at breakfast became a lecture about how careless I was. Forgetting my homework meant I was grounded for days. I tried harder, but the harder I tried, the less they seemed to care. It was like I was invisible, except when I messed up, and even then, their anger didn't feel personal. It felt mechanical, like I was just another problem on their to-do list. When my mom announced she was pregnant, everything changed. She was glowing, and my dad couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, I saw them genuinely happy. I didn't understand why their joy made me feel so uneasy. I didn't know it yet, but deep down, I already sensed that my days with them were numbered. A few weeks later, my mom started packing my suitcase. "It's just for a while," she said when I asked what was happening. "You're going to live with Aunt Diane. She has more time to help you right now." My dad sat me down and tried to explain that this was for my own good. He told me I wasn't doing well in school and that a change of scenery might help me focus. But I wasn't naive. I knew the truth. They were sending me away because I didn't fit into their perfect little family anymore. The car ride to Aunt Diane's house was silent except for my quiet sobbing. I begged them to let me stay, promising I'd be better. I'd get straight A's, keep my room spotless, and never talk back again. But they just shook their heads and told me this was what I needed. I didn't realize then that this decision wasn't about me at all, it was about them. When we arrived at my aunt's house, she greeted us warmly. Aunt Diane was my dad's older sister, a woman who had never married or had children of her own. She lived alone on the family farm and seemed genuinely excited to have me there. But her kindness only made the situation more painful. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to go home, even if home wasn't where I felt loved. My parents stayed for 2 days to help me settle in, but their visits felt superficial. They avoided my tears and my questions, focusing instead on unpacking my things and making small talk with Aunt Diane. When they finally left, I stood at the window and watched their car disappear down the road. That was the moment it hit me, I wasn't part of their family anymore. Aunt Diane tried her best to comfort me. She sat with me as I cried myself to sleep every night for weeks. She didn't push me to talk, but she made it clear that she was there for me whenever I was ready. Slowly, I started to adjust. Diane was different from my parents in every way. She was patient, attentive, and genuinely caring. She didn't just tolerate me, she actually seemed to enjoy having me around. As time went on, I began to thrive under her care. Diane encouraged me to express my feelings, something I had never been allowed to do before. She helped me catch up in school, introduced me to the joys of farm work, and made me feel like I was part of a team. For the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered. Meanwhile, my parents stayed distant. They sent small checks every month, just enough to cover my basic expenses, but they rarely called or visited. On the rare occasions I did see them, it felt like they were visiting a distant relative, not their own child. Over time, I stopped hoping for their approval or affection. I realized I was better off without them. By the time I turned 16, I had built a life for myself on the farm. I had friends, good grades, and a sense of purpose. Aunt Diane became my family in every way that mattered. She was the one who cheered me on at school events, who celebrated my birthdays, and who stayed up late talking with me when I couldn't sleep. My parents, on the other hand, were little more than a memory. I thought I was free from my parents' shadow until they called out of the blue. It was a quiet weekend at Aunt Diane's farm, and I was home from college, helping her with some chores. The phone rang, and when Diane handed it to me, her expression told me everything I needed to know. "It's your parents," she said hesitantly. I hadn't spoken to them in years. My initial reaction was shock, followed by a wave of anger. Why were they calling now? Reluctantly, I took the phone and said hello. After a few awkward pleasantries, they got straight to the point. They wanted me to move back in with them after graduation. "We've been so proud of your progress," my mom said in a tone that sounded rehearsed. "We think it's time for us to be a family again." I didn't believe a word of it. I asked them why they suddenly cared, and after some hesitation, they came clean. "Your sister has been difficult lately," my dad admitted. "She's going through a rebellious phase, and it's been hard for us. We thought reconnecting with you might help her see what's possible with hard work and determination." In other words, they wanted to use me as a trophy to prove to their friends and family that they were capable parents. It wasn't about me, it was about their reputation. Hearing that confirmed everything I had suspected about them for years. They hadn't changed. They still cared more about appearances than they did about their children. "I'm not coming back," I said firmly. "You didn't raise me. Aunt Diane did. If you want to fix your reputation, you'll have to do it without me." The line went silent for a moment, and then they started their usual guilt trip. They reminded me of the checks they had sent every month, claiming they had always supported me in their own way. But I wasn't having it. "The money you sent barely covered my expenses," I said. "Aunt Diane paid for almost everything herself, and she never once complained. She's the one who raised me. You don't get to take credit for her sacrifices." That's when they got defensive. My mom accused me of being ungrateful, while my dad claimed they had done the best they could. Their voices grew louder, but I didn't back down. For the first time, I told them exactly how I felt. I told them how much their abandonment had hurt me, how much better my life had become without them, and how little I wanted to do with them now. Eventually, they hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone, a mix of anger and relief washing over me. I had stood up to them, and it felt good. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. No matter how much I had grown, a part of me still wished they had been different. In the weeks that followed, I learned more about my sister's struggles. She had become the polar opposite of me, spoiled, entitled, and rebellious. At just 12 years old, she was already causing chaos at home and at school. The breaking point came on her birthday when she was caught smoking at her own party. Our grandparents were there and immediately intervened, scolding my parents for their lack of discipline. That incident was the final straw for my grandparents. They filed for temporary custody of my sister, arguing that she needed structure and guidance. To my surprise, the court agreed, and she moved in with them shortly after. Once my sister was out of my parents' house, she started reaching out to me. At first, our conversations were short and awkward. She didn't know me, and I didn't know her. But over time, we started to connect. She told me how our parents had warned her not to talk to me because I was a bad influence. Hearing that broke my heart. I reassured her that none of it was true and that I wanted nothing more than to build a real relationship with her. She opened up about the pressure she felt to be perfect, to make up for the mistakes our parents had made with me. It reminded me of my own childhood, though in her case, the pressure came in the form of overindulgence rather than neglect. Our parents had given her everything, money, freedom, and attention, but none of it had been the kind of love she needed. With our grandparents' guidance and therapy, she's slowly starting to find her way. I'm hopeful that, in time, she'll heal from the damage our parents caused. And I'm determined to be there for her, no matter what. As for me, my life has never been better. I'm in college, working toward a business degree so I can take over Aunt Diane's farm when she retires. I visit her every weekend, and our bond is as strong as ever. She's more than an aunt to me, she's my mother, my mentor, and my family. My parents, on the other hand, are still trying to save face. They've started telling relatives that they made mistakes but always had their children's best interests at heart. Most of the family isn't buying it, especially now that my grandparents have custody of my sister. Their actions speak louder than their excuses. Looking back, I feel a mix of anger and gratitude. Anger for what my parents put me through, but gratitude for the life I've built without them. I've learned that family isn't about blood, it's about the people who show up for you, who love you unconditionally, and who make you feel like you belong. For me, that's Aunt Diane. And now, maybe one day, it will include my sister too.